Good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Adoption Dialog, the show that talks all about the joys, complexities, and challenges of the adoption world. My name is Judith Alexis Craig, and I'm an adopted person, an adoptive parent, therapist, and social worker, and it's a pleasure to be one of your co-hosts.
And my name is Sally Bafor, originally an interior architect. Because I adopted my children, I gave up work and became an adoption consultant. And I'm operating from London, and Judith is speaking from Canada. So we're happy today to be with you. And for this episode, we've got Dr. Elaine Arnold. Dr. Elaine Arnold is a founder of Supporting Relationships and Families. It's an organization that was formerly known as the Separation and Reunion Forum. And so today she's going to talk about it. She'll tell us what experiences she went through that led to setting up that organization. And then we're going to also explain to you why there's a relationship with that organization and adoption. So we're going to start, we won't, let's start straight away by asking Dr. Arnold, please, to introduce herself.
I'm Dr. Elaine Arnold. I began my professional career life as a teacher, and then I switched to social work when I found that a number of children who were recognized by teachers and families as not learning properly, if you may say that, in school, and whom some of the parents said were beyond their control. These children were between 4 and 6, and I thought that this was too early to think that these children could be beyond the parents' control. I thought that the parents lacked understanding of child development and needed help in order to discipline these children. In the Caribbean in those days, and probably still now, parents would use corporal punishment, and they've considered that a slap or hitting a child with any instrument near to hand was not abuse. It was just teaching them how to behave, stop behaving badly, as they thought, and give them the attention that they needed. Some parents would say, oh, he is only trying to get attention, not realizing that that was exactly what they needed. They needed attention. And so I thought that I would change my career, get training in social work, and invite these people to come to be trained.
Okay. So thank you very much indeed. I want to go back. Let me go back. First of all, we need to have an understanding of where you are operating. Were you here, or? And I think the first question really should be, where is your country of origin? I think that's the most important thing. Yeah.
My country of origin was Barbados.
Oh, Barbados. So are you first generation?
Yes.
Yes.
No,
Okay.
I then went on to live in Trinidad.
Oh. At what age? At what age were you when you went to Trinidad?
I was old.
Oh, so that means that you went to school and you were born in Barbados.
I
went to all
school
your schooling.
Yes.
And
then I left school, went to Trinidad.
Okay.
trained as a teacher in the Teachers Training College,
Okay.
and then came to England for my tertiary education.
Okay. Now we have the context. Yeah, I think that's an important context for us because when you're talking about, and I'm going to interject and say, spare the rod and spoil the child, because that's what
Yes,
was used all the time for us, and I was smacked left, right, and center, and I survived it, and I'm still standing here to tell the tale. But it's a different story now. But yes, you're
precisely.
right. I mean, you are right. Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's how you came to England, and then you
yes.
worked as a teacher. When you came, you immediately worked as a teacher. So which time of the when would this have been? 60s or
This happened in the late 50s.
oh? So did you come with the Windrush?
I came after the Windrush.
Just
The
after.
Windrush came in 48,
Oh, 48. So you came
Oh,
later. Yeah.
isn't it? And I came after
Okay.
because I had seen the Windrush ship in the harbor
Oh.
in Trinidad.
Oh.
And I had seen some of the people getting on the boat.
wow.
And at that time, everyone there was wondering why were they leaving this island to go to a country that is so cold and
Yeah.
bleak.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting. And then you found yourself coming to that island a few
Yes.
years, except the country a few years later, a
I
decade
came
later.
later, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I came as a student then
Mhm.
because I had finished my training, and the University of Swansea accepted my training as part of my first degree.
Oh wow.
Yes,
Back then. Back
that
then.
was what they used to do in those days. Yes,
Oh, that's fantastic.
yes.
And how was your experience in the school when the university when you went there? There couldn't have been many black people to start with.
There were not.
Mm.
There were there were about two of us black ones, and the majority were from other countries because we had been given a scholarship from the United Nations
Oh,
from the technical communications part of the United Nations.
okay.
And they wanted to train us, and we would go back to our countries and tell them what we had learned.
Oh, wow.
Yes,
So,
so
but then when you trained, before I even get to that stage, what was your experience at the time in the university, especially being the only, well, one of two black people in your
yes,
experience?
the university was extremely curious. They were they wanted to know all about us, what we did, what we ate, what was our culture.
Mhm.
Um, did we wear clothes like them? Because they
Oh,
thought we wore grass skirts.
Oh
oh,
my
that
goodness.
is interesting.
That's
And did we live
horrible.
in houses
They
or
thought you
in
lived on trees or
hammocks?
hammocks. Oh, oh,
Yes.
really?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
They thought
Gosh.
we all swung from the trees in hammocks and was singing and happy all day.
Wow.
So,
That's quite a lot to contend with, I can imagine. That's the stereotyping and that sort of level of discrimination. How did you, I guess, face that? What sort of did
yes,
you lead on?
they
Um,
didn't they didn't think they were discriminating. They
right.
thought they thought that they were just um, curious to find out. And they invited us to their homes,
Mhm.
to their meetings, to their events.
Mhm.
They wanted to sing and dance with us and all of those things. So we did. And then they sent us to live in different parts of the country in different homes.
Oh.
And I I was placed in a Welsh home.
Mm.
That was
Mhm.
very, very interesting. There were children, school children,
Mhm.
and the children wanted to take me to school,
Oh.
talk to their friends and their teachers.
Oh.
Yes, and the teachers wanted me to come, and and the family wanted to take me out. And
Was it so really it was a because effectively you were novelty.
I was,
You were novelty.
I
And I
was.
think it sounds to me like rather than a negative discrimination, yes, they were very, very ignorant, no question.
Yes,
But
Mm.
there was a novelty element here, which is why they wanted to take you everywhere and
yes,
wanted everybody. And I think that many of us have been through similar situations, and I think it's the way you deal with it because you can either get angry about it,
that's
or
right.
you can actually recognize that this is an opportunity for me to educate them too.
Exactly.
Mm.
That
Yeah.
was exactly what I thought.
Okay. Yeah.
So they taught me a few words in their language.
Okay.
And I made the mistake of one day when I was invited to a meeting in the mayor's office. And as he greeted me at the door, I said, Boreda, which is good morning. And they began to speak to me in fluent Welsh.
Oh no, your
So
accent must have been very good for them to
I said, I'm sorry, that is all about all I know. And and then I said, oh, yes, I remember. I also know
Mm.
what is a cup of tea,
very
kupalo du
important.
te, and I know what is a slice of bread. So I said those, and then we sat down, and then the meeting went on, and they translated, and we had a
Amazing.
wonderful meeting.
It's
And
wonderful.
I'm still friends with some of those people that their
Oh,
grandchildren.
oh, really?
Yes,
Gosh, that's amazing. That's a wonderful. That's a very positive story to hear. Actually, I'm very pleased to hear that. Yeah,
I
yeah,
thought you would
yeah.
enjoy that.
Yeah, I went.
Yes,
But that's beautiful. So then so after that experience of working here, or the experience, I suppose Wales would have been another interesting exposure if the kids were taking you into school
yes,
because you saw another side of school where you weren't actually teaching. But when
that's
you
right.
finished your teaching, obviously you didn't go back to the Caribbean. But did you find working here? That's another question. Why was it you didn't go back to Caribbean? Is there a reason?
I did go back
Oh, after
after
that?
that,
Oh, mm,
and I tried to tell the government what I had learned in the university because we did social history, economics, psychology, and social studies. And I went back to tell them, but they were not particularly interested. They said, we have no reports that you teach badly here. So just go on doing what you were doing before you went
okay. And this was where in Trinidad or
in
Barbados?
Trinidad.
Oh, so then by this stage, you were settled enough in Trinidad to come back to Trinidad rather than
Yes,
Barbados.
yes,
Okay,
it was from Trinidad that I got the scholarship.
sure, of course. So that's where you had to go back to.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Mm.
And
Wow.
Oh,
so I returned to England and did my tried to get trained in child guidance and adult mental health and
Mm.
yeah. So that was why I was interested in children being adopted and children being fostered. children being placed in care.
I see. What's the direct connection? I'm a bit lost here. What was the connection with the children being in care? What was it about it that drew you to that whole area?
Mm-hmm. Because I realized how people felt when they were separated from families and all that that was familiar to them. And I thought that it would be good for people to look at these feelings in children and in adults.
May I ask, Dr. Elaine, when
Yes.
was the first experience of this, just to put into some kind of context for us, that you experienced which actually sensitized you to this reality that this is a problem? Do you remember that first experience that did that?
My first experience was getting on that plane in Barbados and waving goodbye to everyone, and knowing that I was going away. Although I could return at any time,
Yeah.
but it was still a sad experience
Mm,
of
mm,
going and not knowing whether the plane would arrive safely or whether
mm,
anyone would die or didn't want to see you again or things like that.
mm.
Lots of unknown factors then
That's right.
that you could sort of relate then. So it sounds like then when you got into teaching, you were able to see children who were going through that, who were in the foster care system and in
Yes,
as your students. So you could really identify with some of their challenges that they were experiencing around some of the same feelings.
yes, very much so.
Okay.
So, Donald, was there also an issue with a lot of children from the Caribbean who came over to England as well, who came over to join families who were here, and an issue that arose when they came in to join a family that, well, their parents had already probably remarried or had a new and established relationship here. Did that play a factor in some of the work that you were doing?
Very much so.
Mm.
Because those parents, when the children came, they did not understand
I'm
how.
sorry, can I go back? I want to rephrase that question because I said it wrongly. If you don't mind, I'm sorry to cut you. It will be edited out. It will be edited out. So I just want to
All
say it
right.
again. So I wanted to ask basically that the children who came from the Caribbean, who came later on to join their parents here, would have come into a situation most of the time where the parents now were now either remarried or established in relationships where there were other children, and they came in.
Yes,
And I suppose the question was, did that also play any part in some of the issues that led to your work in this area?
yes.
Mm.
Those children were not happy at school, and very often the teachers would call because there weren't many of us black qualified people. So very often, the teachers would call for help in dealing with these children. And I joined a voluntary organization,
Mm.
and so that we would be able for them to come to a place and talk about it, and for me to explain what happens when a child is separated, when that attachment is broken, and what happens. Now, although the children love them as their mothers, they loved their surrogate mothers more because they had,
So do you mean the surrogate mothers are the left behind in the Caribbean?
yes,
Right.
their
We need to clarify that.
grandmothers, their children, their aunts, maybe good friends of the families who had brought them up, who had been there when they were needing care, you know, when they were feeling ill, who comforted them. It was these surrogate people. So they began to understand this, and although the relationship was not very close, it was bearable. But very often they were unable to communicate with each other. And as we know, communication is the main ingredient in relationships. Some of the children, when they went to school and saw that their white peers were going into care if they weren't getting on with their parents, their mothers particularly, they asked to go into care. They would say, oh, we're not, my mother and I are not getting on. I want to get into care. I want to go into care. And very often, the social workers, they were not trained in knowing what to do. They would take the child's word and find a place and put them into care. So that was the number of children.
Can I please ask what percentage of our so this would have been mainly children who've come in from the Caribbean at the time, who were brought in. What sort of percentage would this be of the children who are voluntarily giving themselves up to go into care? Roughly, any idea? Do you have any idea?
Yes, this was about 75%.
Oh, and that's really, and it was predicated on the fact that they perceived that they weren't getting on with their parents and they'd rather go into care.
Yes.
And I'll say why I'm asking you this, because I coming from Africa, I came here when I came to study as a student, so I had no experience with social services, had no history with them, and I remember when I started doing my assessment for the children, some of these issues kept coming up, and I didn't understand it because I didn't understand the history, but now I'm beginning to understand why it was that our Black community were so skeptical about social services, because the perception that I got to find out was that they said all social services do is they come and take our children away.
Yes.
So this is where it's coming from. So in many cases, but there must be cases where they took the children away. There was some where the kids also voluntarily, like you're saying, went into care. I didn't realize that they actually voluntarily went in, but I can see where that's coming from. So, but
Yes.
then were there some that were forcibly taken into care against their will? Because that was my understanding, and obviously,
Yes.
Well,
Well, as I said, I joined this organization, which at the time was based in Peckham, and they looked, Peckham, London, and they were looking at recruiting Black children, Black parents for Black children. Yeah, at the time it was known as
foster for what? For what purpose? Was fostering or for adoption?
Either one, either.
Which year would that have been? This would have been around around the 70s or 80s?
That was around the 80s.
Okay.
And yes, that was around
80s, yeah.
the 80s.
So before,
So very often they would get groups of black children together and hear what they thought about being cared for by white families.
Mm.
And I remember vividly there was a boy, he was about 9, and he was rather quiet during the meeting. He wasn't talking very much. And then when the facilitator asked him, "What do you think?" He said, "Two white people can't have a black child. That is stupid."
Oh, wow.
Really?
Well, we
Out of the mouth of babes.
we had to hide our laughter. It was serious.
Yeah.
But the
Mm.
way he said it,
Yeah.
he just,
Yeah.
no, no,
Yeah.
two white people can't have black children. That is stupid.
Wow. Sounds I'm
Mm,
familiar with that. I
mm,
took my son to see a therapist once, and my son told the therapist, "You are a white man and you do not understand my issues. I don't know
Mm.
what I'm talking to you about." He was 9 years old. I was
yeah.
so shocked. And
Mm,
it was extraordinary thing is he was right
yes.
because the man was completely off tangent. And instead of listening to what the child was saying, he said, "Are you sure they did that to you? Are you sure? Are you sure?" And so my child said, "Oh,
Oh.
yeah, do you know what kind of therapy is this?" And that's when and he got up and said, "Mommy, I don't want to talk to him anymore. I'm leaving." I had to get up and then I looked at him and I said, "Well, we left." So it's interesting, and that's interesting coming from a boy, my son, and this young man
Yes,
finally
yes,
came up with that sort of thing.
yes, the
Women
girls.
tend to be a little more circumspect, I guess.
That's right.
Tactful, yes.
Well, the girls tended not to bother too much about what people said.
Mm.
They tried to just get on with their work and thought that they would soon be grown up and would leave home anyway and have their own families.
Mhm.
But some of them did. Some of the girls did respond um, to them, and like your son told them they didn't know what they were talking
He
about.
told them straight up. Yeah, he did actually.
Wow.
But
Yes.
so, Dr. Arnold, the thing is that with these children, so basically, and I think we need a bit of context here, and the context is this would have been a time up until that point when actually Black families were not allowed to adopt or foster children here in England.
Yes, because they were
Uh-huh.
thought
Yeah.
not to have the skills.
Mm. And so if
Although
that,
they would, although they saw that how the children were busily cared for and all that, and at times they also would allow them to care for their children when they took
interesting.
them to the
That's
nursery.
Mm.
fascinating.
That is fascinating because Judith, you're going to ask a question. I'll ask the question after you said yours. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I mean, I think that's so interesting, isn't it? Because historically, as we know, there were Black nannies very
That's right.
often
That's
Mhm.
right.
caring for white children.
Mhm.
So to have that sort of those statements made that
Mm.
Black families don't know what they're doing and don't understand how to care for, I think it's important to point out with this history, right? Because we always go back to history to look at what's happening now and what's happened in more recent years is there has been a under I guess number wise, there are less Black families who tend to, right, be in the adoption or foster community.
Mhm.
It's shifted quite a lot in the last, 15, 20 years, but there's still this challenge that exists. And I think it's important for people to understand and put context around why that is, that there were barriers put into place for these families to actually do this. Because informally, as we know as well from the Caribbean, from the continent, and many other places around the world, Black parents and families do step in and foster or adopt children. It's
Yes.
just not necessarily done in this formalized manner we have in North America, in the UK, etc. So I really thank you for sharing that, because again, it's just looping back for people to understand. And we still have this challenge to this day, right? And
Yes.
not having an appreciation for cultural difference, and embedding that into our care system, really, and therefore bringing forward more Black families.
Yes.
Well, I'm not surprised to hear you say that, disappointed, but it does give us, I think, some more insight into why, we are where we are today, for
Yeah.
sure.
And I'd like to ask you, following up on what Judith is saying, I need to pick at this a little bit more. And it's about when the teachers were saying that they needed help in managing some of these children at school, what kinds of behaviors were the children displaying for teachers to almost throw their hands in the air in that kind of manner? Well, what was that about?
Well, many of these teachers thought that children weren't taught formally. And so they would sort of ignore them in the class. And these children would either take the role of the clown and try to distract other children, because they would have finished the work that the teacher had put on the board. In those days, there was a lot of blackboard and chalk and blackboard writing. So they would finish their work, close their book, fold their arms on the desk and look around to see who was still struggling, or if any of the indigenous children had finished too, they would start to play and distract the children, the others. So the teachers thought that behavior was not acceptable. And this was how they began to exclude them from school.
And then also this would have been in the 50s, I think, and also into the 60s, where Black children were actually put into. I met a lady who was telling me, and I read about it as well, where Black children were put in schools. They were literally just put into a classroom for subnormal children. And apparently made to just sit there and watch films. And I remember a girlfriend of mine was telling me this, and our interaction with Jessica Huntley and Eric Huntley also revealed a lot of that.
Yes.
Which is why they set up their Boogaloo, production publications, because they started bringing the children into their homes so that they could actually get to read. And and what very sad about that experience, from what I gather, is that back home, when you send your child to school, they get an education. So most of the parents who are here knew that once you put your children in the school, you don't have to worry about a thing. So what they didn't realize was they had to keep an eye on everything, and what maybe didn't even believe or listen to what the children were saying. So that probably also led to some kind of distraction. Because one of the ladies I spoke to said to me that there were about 25 of them, and they were all put into this remedial class, subnormal children. And all they did was watch films when they went to school.
Yes.
And there was only one white child in their class because she was subnormal. And
or special needs, we would say now, and for our language, we would say, children with special needs, or children who were neurodivergent. But yes, back then that was that was some of the language that they used.
That they were using at the time. That's true. And
Yes.
so, thank you, Judy, for that. And I think what was also particularly what was highlighted by that thing was also the fact that the effect it had on them mentally. Because a lot of young people who were very bright found it an extremely frustrating thing. And she said a lot of the bright ones amongst them actually started having mental health problems.
Yes.
So would this have been the issue that you were dealing with at the time, Dr. Arnold?
Oh, yes. I knew the Jessica, when she opened her bookshop, and very often I would be there because at the time I was doing my research, and I went to her shop to find literature and so on, and I would be there when teachers came to find work. And also Bernard Cord, who was the author of that book, used to come around.
Which book was that? What book was that?
How Bernard Cord, how the English made the African child subnormal.
Okay.
Is that it?
Okay. We're
Is
going
it?
to.
Is it?
We're
Yeah,
good. I'll
Bernard
look.
Cord. Yes,
Bernard Cord. Okay.
Cord. Coard.
Okay. Coard. Okay. Well, I'll put the title of. Yeah, okay, that's good. Thank
Yeah.
you for that.
And so black schools became fashionable. Teachers and parents on a Saturday would go to church halls or meet club rooms, and the children would come and they would teach them.
The black children, specifically, I think.
Yes.
The black children would come. Yeah.
And there were then black teachers, well, black people who had maybe come from the Caribbean, who had been teachers, but when they came here, weren't appointed as teachers, couldn't get work as teachers. They worked in other instances, would go. And there was a black psychologist, I don't know whether you've come across her, Waveney
Waveney.
Michelle.
No, I didn't meet Wavy, but the one I do know very well is Agri Burke.
Agri Burke was a
Well, he's a
psychiatrist.
psychiatrist. Yeah, he was a psychiatrist.
And
Yes.
Waveney, the woman, was a psychologist.
Okay.
She came from Guyana as an adult and was the first black psychologist in this country.
Oh, okay.
So she used to go and assess the children and train the teachers. And then the Ministry of Education employed her then to teach teachers. So that was how that came about.
Did that improve things? Did it improve things?
I think it did
Impact.
to a certain extent. Yes, I think it did. Because then some children, their self-esteem improved and they were able to learn, they were able to ask questions in school, and they were able to challenge the careers officer who wanted them to do sport or nursing. Not that anything is wrong with these nursing or sport, but they were able to say this is not the only thing that black people can do. We can do medicine, we can do law, we can do any profession that anyone else can do. And so they were gradually admitted to universities. And now there are many professional black lawyers, teachers, doctors.
But it wasn't an easy journey for them. I mean, if you don't know this, or the young people who are coming up now, who haven't got an idea of the history, it's been a very difficult struggle for black people to arrive at the place where we now have black people in every profession in this country.
Yes.
Because from what you're saying, at that time, it was very limiting. They were limited to what they could do. I see.
And how empowering it was for these teachers who did, like yourselves and the Huntleys, who provided the opportunity and the resources for children to really be able to build up their self-esteem, as you said. That's such a key part of feeling empowered and feeling able to challenge what was being presented to them. So I
Yes.
really thank you, you know, on behalf
Yeah,
of these young people, because that truly is life-changing
it
work
is.
that you were doing. And I think often it's not recognized, right? And it's not seen as how essential that work is. So truly thank you on behalf of the children, you know, and the lives that you all change. And that was a movement, you know, but it's the kind of quiet movement that happens behind the scenes that nobody sees. But incredibly powerful,
It is.
incredible.
And it's thanks to you that we have so many, a range of professions that Black people can now go into easily and readily, you know, if they want to. But I think the other question that I wanted to ask you was the children who ended up in care. That we're coming back to that again. They would not have been able to. I'm sure they wouldn't have had access to Jessica Huntley and all the programs that you were doing, or did they? I mean, because they were in care. Can you give us a picture of what was happening there with them? Because if so many of them end up in care, who was reaching out to them in their white homes?
Well, when they were admitted into care, and this was happening all over the country where Black people settled. Um, some of the staff were not trained because very often in these homes, untrained people were employed. There was very little money to run the homes, the children's homes, and they were therefore unable to employ people who had been qualified. Some had been trying to qualify but had to drop out because they could not pay the fees. And some just thought that it was like looking after their children in the home, in their own homes, and there was nothing to learn but just to go to the home, do their shift, feed the children, see that they were going to school and so on, and leave. So when the children began to misbehave, as it were, they would punish them, and sometimes they would call the police. So the children would run away, and then they would be reported as missing persons.
So who would be doing this? Their parent, the new foster parent. Oh, sorry. Let's just.
The people in the home,
Okay, so
carers
just
in
let.
the home.
Can we go back? Let me go back and let me retrack a bit. So what's
Mm.
happening is that the children were not actually put into foster homes. They were
No,
put into residential homes, what like orphanages, actually, effectively. But they were called homes at the time, weren't they?
homes,
Children's homes
children's
often.
homes, yes.
So they were residential, but they were like orphanages, weren't they?
They were, in a way,
But they were called
but
homes.
they were
Okay.
called children's homes.
Children's homes. Okay. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
I misunderstood because I was thinking all the while that you were talking about foster
foster.
homes, but they were not foster homes. They were put into residential homes.
A few of them may have been put into foster homes, but then they wouldn't have had staff in foster homes. They would just select individuals who would look after them, and they would be able to give the children back if the children didn't behave as they thought they should. So the residential homes were the ones that were mostly selected.
And that's where you said the staff who went there thought that they
Yes,
were looking after children of their own and didn't necessarily manage the difficulties very well. So
yeah.
you're saying that if the children misbehave, they just call the police.
Sometimes they would, yeah.
And what would the police do with children at that time?
They would take them to the station and maybe talk to them, depending on the attitudes of the police, or they would just keep them there for some time,
Well, you mean,
and then send them back.
oh, they'll be put into jail for a little while.
Yeah, they didn't call it jail, but I mean, they kept them in the station there.
Detention.
Yes, they would, allow them to sit on the benches outside. And, the police station in those days, I haven't been in one recently, so I don't know if they've changed, but there would be a counter where the police would be listening to the complaints, and there would be benches around where people would sit and wait till their turn. So they would allow them to sit there. And if there was no room, they would put them, in a cell till they were ready, and then maybe give them a piece of paper and a pencil. And when the evening came and they were finished work, they would say, "Let me see what you did," and say, "Come now, you're going home, and don't see that you don't come back here."
Wow.
I see.
Yeah.
Very traumatic way of, essentially disciplining children at that time, to take little children and have them sit in a jail,
Yeah.
That's extremely concerning. Is that, I guess I'm curious to know more and understand more about the organization that you founded. And is it because of sort of these experiences that you had and witnessed, is that what led you to found Supporting Relationships and Families?
Now, my organization was founded to look at those children who had been left behind and came here to join their parents.
Okay.
Okay. And they went on, and then we went on to look at how they were faring in their places of work and at home, and with their own children. And then we saw that these children were being put in, children are being put in residential homes, and some of these people, we wanted to work with some of these children. Yeah. And they went on to train specifically to work with these children, and then some of them came back to work in the homes.
So you're saying that the children that you were working with when they were young were the ones who grew up to train to come back and work in the same institutions, in the same organization.
They wanted to, yes.
They wanted to, and they did they?
Some of them did, yes.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Because they had the experience of what to do and how to help the other children coming up.
Yeah.
How much of that situation has been resolved now?
Well, it's a bit different because many of the people now with whom I work were born here. They were born in this country. So they haven't got that experience which their parents had. Many of the parents have returned home or gone to live nearer to other children and so on. So they don't know as much about what happened as the first set of children. And some of them are reluctant, really, to learn about it.
You mean the children who are born here are reluctant to hear the experiences that their parents went through? Is that what you're saying?
Some of them.
Wow.
They can't feel with it. They can't experience that.
Right.
Yeah.
And how does that affect them? The fact that so they can't empathize with what their parents went through. How does that affect them, and how they and how their lives are progressing?
Some of them are progressing extremely well. Others run into trouble, and they treat the children as they had been treated, and some of them who have families, they love their children, but they can't relate to them. They can't communicate and relate to them as they would of the children who were born to them in this country. Does that make sense?
Okay, so they had a child back home, left the child there, came here, started a new family, and they have children who are here. But you're saying that so when they brought the one back home from the Caribbean to join the family that were here,
Yes.
even the parents couldn't relate to them anymore. I
No,
can understand the new
that's
children not being able to relate to them, but the parents couldn't relate to the child from the Caribbean anymore.
Yeah,
I
that was
see.
it.
Well, what was that about? I mean, why would that be what brought about the miscommunication? What was it exactly? Were you able to identify what that was?
Well, in attachment theory, if you are not attached to a person in the early years,
Yeah.
you can't really, not you can't, but it's difficult for you to be able to get close to them and to communicate. So it was not that some of them didn't try. They tried. But very often, because of their life circumstances, there was an opportunity. I mean, some were working day and night. They would meet each other on the stairs, mother coming in and children going to school, and coming home at night. But one good thing was that it changed a cultural pattern of mothers only looking after children and fathers being the breadwinner. Because when they worked in different shifts, mothers would look after the children when they were there, and then fathers would take over when the mothers went. Well, of course, this caused a change in how children related to both parents. Yeah, some became very close to their fathers, who looked after them, and then mothers became jealous of this, that they were losing
their husbands.
That's right.
Wow.
Wow, what a complicated situation.
Just
But it's human nature, isn't it? It's also because it's just losses, emotional losses all around, and this is how it impacts on all the individuals involved in it.
Yes,
I see. Wow,
that's it.
that's a difficult one to tackle, isn't it? Because you're having to look at all the different angles and deal with all of them individually because they all have specific needs, don't they?
In different, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I guess that's a good question then, is how have you been able to navigate that in supporting all members of the family in your work? How has that sort of been achievable or maybe not so much or challenging? How were you able to sort of navigate?
Well, I must say that it was difficult, and that entails looking at the entire family. And so some of those who have been qualified then began to train in family therapy. So we now have family therapists, and you know, who will work with these families. So they may come to us, and we realize that the whole family needs to involve, and they would be referred to the family therapist, who would then work with them for a number of sessions, which are negotiable.
So this is when you change the name from Supporting Relations with Families to Separation and Reunion Forum. When did you make that change, that transition, the
That's the
change in
other
the
way
name?
around.
Oh,
Separation
sorry,
and Reunion Forum
was
was when
original.
we were just looking at immigration.
Okay.
And then, as we saw other people coming to our events who had been separated through different circumstances, such as having been adopted, having been fostered, having gone to boarding school, and situations like that, that we thought that we should change the name from Separation Forum to supporting relationships and families, not in families, but and families.
So you broaden
Yes,
your
we
reach.
broaden and we widen it, and we wanted to illustrate that we were working with people of diversity, that we were a diverse organization and would accept people from all faiths, all religions, all
Excellent.
everything that made them different.
I suppose your experience, the extreme experience that you had at the beginning, would have equipped you with a lot of knowledge to be able to deal with anything that was thrown at you, really. And I suppose that's how you're able to become so diverse later on.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Well, so what is your work? The work that you do, is it which area of work? Is it mainly to do with adoption and fostering now? Are you doing a lot of that kind of work at the moment?
I personally don't do a lot of that work now.
Oh, I see. I meant actually meant the organization. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I refer people to various organizations, and I also look at people who would like to do what I do and try to encourage them to take over from me, because I am getting old.
And have you found people who take over?
A few are willing, but
Lovely.
they're younger, and they need to do their own work and look after their children and all that. So they will give the time that they can spare
That's
Right.
right. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Interesting.
So,
And is it on a voluntary basis? Do families present themselves to you if they need support? Do you do a lot of outreach to reach out to families who identify? Because I know you're not working in the school system any longer, but will you get referrals from teachers or social workers to sort of get the support in for folks?
yes, we try to encourage people to come voluntarily. And then I try to get the people who are available to work in those situations. So some will work with people in schools, especially schools. They like to work in schools because they get at the children and the families in the schools.
Well, that makes
Wow.
a lot of sense.
So,
And some police
Okay.
come to find out more about attachment and about how they can help and how they can work in the school.
so how can some of our listeners who want to get involved support the work that you're doing?
Oh. they can they can get our address on the website,
Mhm.
supporting relationships and families, and they can email or I wouldn't say text. I'm not so good on the text,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I do get some. And my volunteers that I have a
Yeah.
volunteer now who will help me with the text
Yeah.
and and say what is their problem, and I'll have a assessment with them and see who I can recommend to help them.
That's brilliant. That's good. So you signpost them a lot of the time. So what advice would you give someone who's currently experiencing family separation or loss? Or would they have to talk to you first? Then you signpost them to the appropriate organization. Is that what
Mhm.
happens?
Yes.
Okay. That's wonderful.
That's
Eh,
excellent. Is there a website that you have? I'm just wondering if folks can sort of check out your work, or if there is email the best form of communication?
I personally prefer email,
Okay, perfect.
but some do like to go on the website.
Okay. Well, we'll make sure we have all your
uh,
details and we'll
Yeah.
post them here so all of our listeners can reach out. And I think it's a really wonderful resource, especially for, as we say, teachers, social workers, people working in the field with children, to be able to have an organization that they can turn to for this type of support.
Hmm.
We know it's so, so important. So, we really do appreciate the work that you're continuing to do. Even
Yeah.
as you mentioned, you're building your nest and getting other folks on board, which is so essential to continuing such great work.
Thank
So
you very much.
thank you very much for coming to share
And
with us some of the experiences that you've had. It's been really very enlightening. And I'd like us to get talk to you some more, especially so that people can fill in the gaps with the historical
yes,
part of it, to the journey of where we are now. And I think that's an important gap. And I'm talking about when you came in the 50s, what was happening at that time,
mm,
social services, the children, and the journey to where we are now. Because I
mm.
think that transition period is very important. So we'd like to bring you back in so that we can have that conversation.
Oh my
So thank you
goodness.
so much for coming. It's really wonderful talking to you.
Well,
And
thank you both very much. And Sally,
yeah,
thank you for all the work you do. I remember you from a long time ago.
we're still at it. Thank you
And
so much.
Judith, I'm glad
Uh,
she's brought you in.
yeah,
Oh, thank
yeah,
you. We
Yes,
appreciate it.
yeah,
yes.
yeah. It's
There's lots to
amazing.
do, so it's so encouraging to see folks taking up the call and stepping in to fill the gap. Really
Yes.
interesting.
Yeah, Yeah.
So
And it's never ending, isn't it? That's the other
It's
thing. It's
never
never
ending.
ending.
It goes
Yeah.
on and on.
And on and on. And we've got to keep on at it
Yes,
until the young people are able to join in, as you said.
that's
Yeah.
right.
But
That's
it's
right.
wonderful. Thank you
continue
so much for
carrying the
coming.
torch.
And
Thank
we'll
you,
be in
Sally.
touch with you again. God bless you.
God
Okay.
bless you too,
Thank you
and
so much.
Judith. Yes,
Lovely.
God bless you.
Thank you. Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.